Let me tell you what's actually happening every spring in gardens all over the world. Millions of people walk into a garden center eyes wide, wallets open. They fill their trolleys with beautiful plants, petunias, begonias, marigolds, lobelia. They go home, they plant their pots, they water them in, and for a few glorious months those containers look incredible. Color everywhere. Neighbors stopping to look. That feeling of a garden done right. And then autumn comes. And then winter. And then those beautiful plants, every single one of them turn to mush. Black, collapsed, finished. And you pull them out, bin them, and stand there looking at empty pots wondering how you're going to do it all again next year. Here's the brutal truth. That cycle is completely, entirely, 100% avoidable. You've been sold a story that containers need to be replanted every year. That seasonal color means seasonal replacement. That the annual turnover is just part of the game. It isn't, it never was. Because there are perennials, genuinely beautiful, genuinely tough, genuinely garden-worthy perennials that will live in your containers, laugh at your winters, and come back in spring looking better than they did the year before. Not just once, not just twice, for years, decades in some cases. I've grown all of these. I've tested them in real containers through real winters, and today I'm giving you the 10 that have never, ever let me down. The 10 that earn their space in the pot every single year. Plant these once, enjoy them forever. Here we go. Plant number 1, Hosta. Let's start with the undisputed king of the shaded container, and honestly, it isn't even close. If you have a north-facing balcony, a dark patio, a doorstep that gets barely any sun, or any corner of your outdoor space that you've quietly given up on, Hosta is the plant that is going to change everything for you. These plants produce some of the most dramatic, most architectural foliage of anything you can grow in a pot. We're talking enormous, deeply ribbed leaves in blue-green, soft gold, cream-edged, and stunning two-tone varieties. Leaves so bold and beautiful that people use them as a focal point the same way they'd use a sculpture. And they do all of this in the deepest, darkest shade that defeats almost every other plant you try to grow there. What surprises most people is that hostas are actually better suited to container life than to the ground. In the ground, they can sit in waterlogged soil for weeks, and wet roots are where hostas run into trouble. In a pot, you control every drop of moisture that goes in. You control the drainage. You control the conditions. And with that control, hostas thrive with a consistency that ground-grown plants simply can't match. Come winter, they vanish completely. Every leaf dies back to nothing, and you're left with what looks like a pot of bare soil. First-timers panic at this point. Don't. What's happening underground is that a robust, incredibly dense root crown is sitting there quietly, loaded with stored energy, just waiting. And then spring arrives, and those tightly coiled shoots push up from the soil with extraordinary force, unfurling into leaves that are larger, more impressive, and more beautiful than anything they produced the previous year. In very cold climates, move the pot to a sheltered position for winter, against a house wall, under a covered area, or into an unheated garage. It's always the roots that need protecting, not the top growth. Keep the roots safe, and your hosta will reward you for a very long time. Plant number 2, Astilbe. If the hosta owns the shade in terms of foliage, Astilbe owns it entirely in terms of flowers, and it does so in a way that looks genuinely extraordinary in a container. Astilbe produces tall, feathery plumes of flowers in shades of deep red, soft pink, pure white, and rich purple, rising elegantly above foliage that is deeply cut and fern-like and beautiful in its own right. In a large pot on a shaded patio, a well-grown Astilbe doesn't just look good. It looks like you've captured a piece of a woodland garden and placed it exactly where you want it. The interesting thing about Astilbe is that containers actually suit it better than many garden beds. In the ground, during a dry summer, Astilbe can really struggle. It needs consistent moisture, and open soil doesn't always provide that. But in a pot, you're in complete control of watering. You keep it consistently moist, you don't let it dry out completely, and Astilbe rewards you with a performance that the ground-grown version never quite manages. Like the Hosta, it dies back fully in winter and reemerges reliably from its root crown every spring. But here's what makes Astilbe genuinely exciting as a long-term container plant. It gets better every year. Year 1, it's lovely. Year 2, it's impressive. By year 3, a single Astilbe in a large container is producing so many flower spikes with such density and height that it becomes a genuine showpiece. One plant, one pot, better every single season. Every 3 to 4 years, divided in early spring before the shoots appear. Pull the root crown apart, repot each section, and suddenly you've turned one plant into several. Free plants, more containers filled, more color, all from something you already own. Plant number 3, lavender. Almost everyone loves lavender. The fragrance that hits you when you brush past it. The silver-gray foliage that catches the light. Those purple flower spikes absolutely covered in bees from morning to evening. In a terracotta pot on a sunny terrace, it's one of the most perfectly satisfying things in the entire plant world. And here's something that genuinely surprises people. Lavender very often performs better in a container than in the ground. The reason is simple. Lavender hates wet roots more than almost anything else. In the ground, particularly in heavier soils or wetter climates, keeping lavender's roots dry enough is a constant challenge. In a pot with the right mix and good drainage holes, you control that entirely. Sharp, gritty, free-draining compost, full sun, and a container that never lets water pool at the base, that's the recipe, and in a pot, delivering that recipe is easy. Unlike the Hostas and Astilbes, lavender doesn't disappear in winter. It holds its silvery foliage year-round, giving you something genuinely beautiful even in the bleakest, grayest months of the year, when the rest of the garden looks bare and defeated. Then spring comes, new growth pushes from every stem, and the whole plant builds itself back up toward another season of flowering. The single habit that separates lavender that thrives for a decade from lavender that goes woody and dies within 3 years is this. After every flowering period, cut it back by about 1/3, always into the green growth, never down into the old woody stems. That's it. That one act of pruning, done consistently, keeps lavender compact, keeps it producing new growth from the base, and keeps it looking and flowering beautifully for years longer than most people ever imagine lavender can last. Plant number 4, Coreopsis. If you've ever stood in your garden in July looking at your containers and thought I just want something that won't stop flowering, Coreopsis is your answer, and it isn't close. Also known as tickseed, Coreopsis produces bright, cheerful, daisy-like flowers in shades of yellow, gold, and warm orange from early summer right through to autumn. And the key word there isn't flowers, it's through. Most perennials have a peak period and then a decline. Coreopsis doesn't really do that. It just keeps producing new flowers, week after week, in what amounts to a near-continuous display that outlasts almost everything else in the container garden. What makes it even more remarkable is how little it asks in return. Poor soil, drought, heat, the occasional bout of neglect, Coreopsis meets all of it with the same cheerful, unbothered energy. It's genuinely one of the most forgiving plants you can grow. Full sun, reasonable drainage, and occasional watering. That's all it takes to keep this plant performing at full capacity for an entire season. Through winter, the root crown sits dormant in the pot with quiet determination, and when spring arrives, it pushes fresh new growth with remarkable speed, back in flower earlier than almost anything else in the container lineup. The one practice that unlocks Coreopsis's full potential is deadheading. You don't even need tools, just run your fingers through the plant regularly, removing the spent blooms. It sounds almost too simple, but the difference it makes to flower production is dramatic. A few minutes of attention once a week turns a good display into an exceptional one, all season long. Plant number 5, Heuchera. Here's a plant that has quietly become one of the most important container perennials in modern gardening, and for good reason. Heuchera or coral bells is grown primarily for its foliage, and that foliage comes in a color range that honestly seems impossible until you see it in person. Deep burgundy, burnt caramel, bright lime green, pewter silver, rich bronze, spotted, ruffled, marbled, there is a heuchera for every color scheme, every design style, every season, every taste. Nothing else in the plant world offers this kind of variety in a single species. And in spring, heucheras push up tall, airy stems of tiny bell-shaped flowers that add a completely different, delicate layer of beauty floating above those extraordinary leaves. They're shallow-rooted, which makes them naturally suited to container life. They don't need depth, they don't need rich soil, they don't need heavy feeding, and they're equally at home in sun or partial shade, a flexibility that almost no other plant on this list can match. That adaptability makes heucheras uniquely useful because you can genuinely use them anywhere. In mild winters, heucheras keep most of their foliage, giving you color and texture during the months when the rest of the garden has completely shut down. Where other pots look bare and forgotten, a heuchera pot looks alive and considered. And each spring, fresh new leaves emerge with intensity and vibrancy that often exceeds even the previous year's coloring. Every couple of years, the crown can begin to rise above the soil surface as the plant develops, making it look leggy and exposed. The fix is simple: lift it, trim the bare stem back, replant it a little deeper. Within weeks, it's rejuvenated completely and performing as if nothing happened. Plant number 6, Sedge ornamental Carex. This is the plant that professional garden designers use, quietly and consistently, when they want containers that look beautiful on every single day of the year, not just during peak season. Sedge or ornamental Carex is a grass-like perennial with fine, arching foliage that moves beautifully in the breeze. The color range runs from deep bronze and rich amber through to bright acid gold and fresh lime green. It brings movement, texture, and an elegance to any container that flowering plants simply can't provide on their own. And unlike those flowering plants, it doesn't have an off-season. It doesn't peak and then fade. It simply always looks beautiful. In winter especially, when your hostas have disappeared, your Astilbes have died back, and your Catmint has retreated, Sedge stands firm. It holds its color, holds its form, and transforms containers that might otherwise look abandoned into something that still feels intentional and alive. For any gardener who cares about how their outdoor space looks in January and February, not just July and August, Carex is essential. It doesn't go dormant. It doesn't take a break. It grows quietly and steadily year-round, and an established Carex in a pot becomes an increasingly full, increasingly beautiful plant with every passing season. Every 2 to 3 years, pull it out, divide the clump into sections, and repot each one. It stays vigorous. The center doesn't die out, and you've just made several plants out of one. Plant number 7, Echinacea. Every container garden needs at least one plant that brings real wildlife energy, something that turns your pots into a living, moving, buzzing ecosystem. Echinacea, the coneflower, is that plant, and it does the job better than anything else available. Those iconic flowers, the raised, domed central cone surrounded by swept-back petals in purple, pink, white, orange, and red, bloom from midsummer deep into autumn, and during that entire period, the bees and butterflies are relentless. A pot of Echinacea in full bloom doesn't just look beautiful. It moves. It hums. It has a life and energy that no purely ornamental plant can replicate. Echinacea is drought-tolerant once established, handles heat with remarkable ease, and thrives in exactly the full sun, well-drained conditions that a good container naturally provides. It is one of the toughest perennials available anywhere, and that toughness translates directly and completely into container success. This plant does not want to fail. It wants to grow. Its deep taproot stores enormous reserves of energy through winter and channels all of that into increasingly vigorous growth each spring. Year 1, it gets established and gives you a taste. Year 2, it delivers properly. Year 3 and beyond, it's a genuine statement, taller, fuller, and more floriferous than you might have imagined when you first planted it. When autumn arrives, resist the urge to cut it back and tidy it up. Leave the seed heads standing through winter. They're architecturally striking in frost and snow. They feed birds through the coldest months, and they'll self-seed lightly, sometimes giving you free new plants appearing around the base of the pot come spring. Plant number 8, Agapanthus. This is the one, the statement plant, the showstopper, the one that makes complete strangers stop on the street and ask you what it is. Agapanthus, the African lily, produces tall, elegant stems, sometimes reaching 4 or 5 feet, topped with spectacular globe-shaped clusters of tubular flowers in the most extraordinary shades of blue, violet, and pure white. In a large pot, it's not just a plant. It's architecture. It transforms a terrace, a doorstep, a balcony from a place that looks nice into a place that looks designed. Now here's the part that catches most gardeners off guard. Agapanthus actually prefers to be pot-bound, genuinely, deliberately cramped. In the ground, the roots spread freely, the plant invests energy in expansion, and flowering can actually decline as a result. In a container, those naturally restricted roots shift strategy entirely. They stop trying to expand and start focusing on reproduction, which means flowers. More of them, more reliably, year after year. Thick, fleshy roots store energy through winter, and the evergreen foliage of many varieties means the plant looks presentable and attractive year-round, even in the quiet months between flowering seasons. The counterintuitive care instruction here is to resist the impulse to pot it on. Gardeners are trained to think a tight pot is a bad thing. With Agapanthus, it's the whole secret. Let it become genuinely crowded. Only move it up a size when flowering visibly starts to decline. Until then, leave it exactly where it is and let it do its extraordinary thing. Plant number 9, Catmint. If someone asked me to recommend a single container perennial for a person who wants maximum beauty for minimum effort, Catmint would be my immediate answer. Nepeta forms soft, relaxed, mounding clumps that cover themselves in tiny tubular flowers, creating a gorgeous lavender blue haze that runs from late spring right the way through to autumn. The silvery green foliage is attractive on its own. The flowers bring it alive, and throughout that entire long season, pollinators treat it like a destination, bees, hoverflies, and butterflies visiting constantly from first light. There is almost nothing Catmint won't tolerate: drought, heat, poor soil, infrequent watering. It handles all of it without complaint. In a sunny container with decent drainage, it's arguably easier to grow than in the ground. Full sun, occasional watering, and Catmint will perform for you with a generosity that seems almost unreasonable given how little it demands. Through winter it retreats completely, and then reemerges in spring reliably and early, often appearing before you expect it, growing quickly, and building toward that first spectacular flush of flowers. The move that unlocks Catmint's full potential, the thing that separates a good display from a truly great one, is cutting it back hard after that first flush fades in midsummer, right down to a few inches from the base. It looks brutal in the moment. Give it 3 or 4 weeks. What comes back is a fresh, compact, vigorous plant covered in new flower buds, ready to deliver a full second wave of blooms that carries right through to frost. Plant number 10, Hellebore. I've saved the best for last. Not the most obvious, not the most expected, but the one that, if I'm being completely honest, earns its place in the container garden more than anything else on this list. The Hellebore, the Lenten rose, the plant that flowers in January. While every other plant in the garden is dormant, gray, and finished, while winter has stripped everything back and the world outside feels bare and colorless and bleak, the Hellebore quietly opens its extraordinary, nodding flowers and blooms right through frost, right through snow, right through the coldest, darkest weeks of the year. January, February, March. Flowers when you need them most desperately, when you've almost forgotten what a flowering plant looks like. These are woodland plants by nature, perfectly evolved for shade, cool temperatures, and the consistently moist but well-drained conditions that a good container provides. They're tough in every direction, slug-resistant, deer-resistant, cold-resistant, and they operate on a completely different calendar to everything else, filling the exact gap in the gardening year that nothing else can touch. But the thing that truly sets hellebores apart, the thing that makes them genuinely unlike any other plant on this list, is their lifespan. A well-grown hellebore in a container doesn't just come back year after year. It comes back for decades, 20 years, sometimes more. That's 20 winters of flowers from a single plant. 20 springs where you don't replace anything, don't spend anything. Just watch something you planted once continue to deliver beauty with quiet, extraordinary faithfulness. Put your hellebore pot where you'll walk past it every single day in winter. By the front door, outside the kitchen window, somewhere your eye falls naturally in those gray morning months, because that's when the magic is most powerful and you genuinely do not want to miss a single day of it. So there they are, 10 plants, one idea that changes the way you think about containers forever. Every year you plant annuals, you're buying time, renting color, starting over, and every spring the garden center collects its fee. But every year you grow these perennials, something different happens. The roots go deeper, the clumps expand, the crowns grow stronger, the flowering gets more abundant, more impressive, more spectacular. You don't reset, you compound, like interest but measured in beauty instead of money. The hosta that fits quietly in its pot in year 1 becomes a dramatic, architectural giant by year 5. The Agapanthus that gives you a modest show in its first summer fills its container with flower stems a few seasons later. The hellebore you plant this autumn could still be flowering in you. Our garden when people you haven't even met yet are watching it bloom. That's what real container gardening looks like. Not a cycle of buying and discarding. Not a seasonal expense. A garden that builds itself year by year, season by season, into something that couldn't have existed any other way, through any shortcut, through any amount of money spent every spring at the garden center. These plants don't need you to keep replacing them. They need you to plant them once, tend them a little, and then trust them to do what perennials have always done: come back. Come back stronger, come back better. One investment, a lifetime of return. Now go plant something that lasts.